New Zealand. It's a land full of places. Perhaps you're not from New Zealand and you'd like to live in one of its many places and enjoy the many things it has to offer, like the beach, the trees, the animals, the nightlife, the containers. Or maybe you are from New Zealand and you'd like to know how your part of New Zealand compares to other parts of New Zealand where other, different New Zealanders live. Let's start at the top of the country with the imaginatively named Northland. Northland is perhaps best known for its famous landmarks like 90 Mile Beach, which gets its name because it's 54 miles long, its historical sites, its big tree, and weed. Northland is New Zealand's capital of greenery. It's also New Zealand's capital of unemployment. What few jobs there are mostly revolve around peddling and/or smoking the ganj. Nice place that doesn't really have a winter, so you won't need a jacket, which is nice because if you live there, you might not be able to afford one anyway. Next, let's move down to Auckland, which I'm sure all New Zealanders will agree is real New Zealand. It has the best roads, the best houses, the best airport, the best rugby team, and the best celebrities in all of New Zealand. It's also New Zealand's biggest city. With a population of 1.6 million, 1 in 4 New Zealanders live in Auckland, and the other 3 dream about what it would be like to live there and serve a glass of Chardonnay for one of the many celebrities like Mike Hoskins at one of Auckland's many stylish waterfront bars. What else is there to say about Auckland other than other parts of the country are only slightly cheaper to live in? Next, just south of Auckland is Hamilton. Slightly over to the east of Hamilton is Tauranga, New Zealand's fastest growing city and the jewel of the aptly named Bay of Plenty. There are plenty of beaches, plenty of sunshine, and plenty of elderly. You'll also need plenty of money to live here because all those oldies have bought every single piece of real estate in the region. Luckily though, it's warm enough for all the service industry workers there to sleep outside. Moving east again is the East Coast. Not much is known about this place because it's one road and many gangs have made it either too hard or too dangerous to enter. Occasionally though, we've been lucky enough to see footage of this mysterious place thanks to intrepid documentarians who've made it past all the gangs. Also on the East Coast is a place called Hawke's Bay, where richer, whiter East Coasters live in a place called Napier. Napier in the Hawke's Bay is famous for its vineyards and Art Deco architecture. There's also another city in the Hawke's Bay called Hastings, which is just across the road from Napier, but it isn't near the sea and it doesn't have any scenery, so you may as well just stay in Napier. Moving down to the lower North Island now. On the eastern side of the region is the WAIRARAPA, a rural area famed for the mighty WAIRARAPA Bush rugby team, and is also home to James Cameron, and on the weekends, many cashed-up Wellingtonians. The western side of the lower North Island is famous for its towns such as Palmerston North and Levin, and a new road that bypasses much of the region to get to Wellington faster. It's only taken 35 years to build. Speaking of Wellington, at the bottom of the North Island is New Zealand's capital city. Wellington is famous for its wind, cafes, bars, movie industry, and more recently, its failing infrastructure. One of the best ways to escape Wellington's wind is to visit the many cultural sites around the city like Te Papa, the Parliament buildings, or the Bucket Fountain. The Upper South Island. After you've wound your way through the beautiful Marlborough Sounds, you arrive at Picton. Not many people hang around Picton, and they either head south to the vineyards around Blenheim or west to the Tasman region, which is famous for New Zealand's most popular national park. Every year, thousands of tourists from all over New Zealand and the world enjoy the beautiful hiking trails and beaches of ABEL Tasman National Park, except for the parts of the park which have inexplicably been sold to foreign billionaires. The main city in the Tasman region is Nelson. Nelson is known for being the sunniest city in New Zealand, and there are no shortage of really interesting locals who'll constantly remind you of this. Head further southwest from the Tasman region and you're on the west coast. Peter Jackson, Lord, Cliff Curtis, and Russell Crowe. They're all famous New Zealanders who aren't from the West Coast. Point being, the West Coast is sparsely populated. It's a geographically huge area with only 30,000 people living in it. The West Coast is famous for its lush rainforests which look like the Dagobah system in Star Wars. If you like rain for about 360 days of the year, and the occasional game of rugby league, the West Coast is for you. Most people don't like these things so much, however, which explains why hardly anyone lives here. So where do most South Islanders live? The answer is on the other side of the Southern Alps in Canterbury, and more specifically, mostly in Christchurch. Christchurch is the largest city in the South Island. Christchurch and the surrounding Canterbury region was originally settled by church-going English settlers who wanted to make a little England in the South Pacific, which explains all the very English gardens and things like river punting in the middle of the city. They even brought other classically English things like classism and racism with them. Even today, Christchurch is pretty much the only place in New Zealand where people will constantly ask you which school you went to as if it was something extremely important. Until 10 years ago, Christchurch was doing quite well economically, and the city was growing very fast. The 2011 earthquake struck though, and its effect on the city and the region as a whole can still be seen and felt today. Even more recently, another man-made tragedy rocked the city, making it perhaps one of the unluckiest places in New Zealand over the last decade. Now we get to the bottom half of the South Island, to Otago and Southland. These regions were settled by pasty Scottish folk who needed the soothing drizzle of the region to ease their sunburn after arriving in more northern and sunnier parts of New Zealand. They loved it there so much that they named almost every town they made after somewhere in Scotland. The largest city in the area, Dunedin, is even the Scottish Gaelic name for Edinburgh. Dunedin's a student town. For 9/10 of the year, 90% of its population are students attending Otago University. Over the summer, they all go back to where they came from though. If you can put up with the cold and drunken students burning couches on the street and forming talentless, bland, mediocre barbecue reggae bands, then you might just survive Dunedin. If you can't handle Dunedin, however, you could always try your luck in Invercargill, the world's southernmost city, home of the Bluff Oyster, a soon-to-be defunct aluminium smelter, and a geriatric career politician of a mayor who doesn't actually know he's the mayor anymore. Of course, the jewel of the Otago region is Queenstown, possibly New Zealand's most picturesque town. Ask foreigners what they think of when asked about New Zealand, and they might come up with images of Queenstown and its snowy capped peaks that surround the town and Lake Wakatipu. Ironically though, Queenstown is the least New Zealand town in all of New Zealand. This is on account of the fact that it's populated by Silicon Valley multi-millionaires who think that no one will ever know where their not-so-secret doomsday bunkers are, and no New Zealander can actually afford to live there. Much of the town's service industry workers are, or were, seasonal working holiday visa backpackers from the UK, Canada, and various countries throughout the EU. So there you go. Which place do you want to live in New Zealand? Is your place better than any of the other places mentioned here? If so, how much better? Why not let us know in the comments? And whether or not you live in Northland, high on weed and can't afford shoes, or you enjoy collecting raindrops in Invercargill, you're still a great New Zealander if you watched all of this video. See you in the next one.